Alright, ladies and box heads, let's talk about the most terrifying ocean mysteries of all time. Starting off with a story where a ship named the Mary Celeste was found sailing by itself, completely abandoned on a random Tuesday morning in 1872, where 10 people would disappear forever without a trace. Okay, let's rewind a little bit. I first have to tell you about how the Mary Celeste had a history of mysteries. The year is 1861, a brand new brigantine is being built in Nova Scotia. 2 masts, wooden frame, all the works. I mean, she's a beauty. The ship that would eventually be named the Mary Celeste is born with the original name Amazon. On her maid voyage, which for my slower little box heads out there means her first time on the water, the captain, a strong, experienced, healthy man, suddenly falls seriously sick. Coughing fits, fever, gasping, the crew tried not to panic. But every time he shouted an order, he'd curl up in pain, clutching his chest. And guys, days later, he was dead. No warning, just gone out of nowhere. And let me get a little spooky on ya. Some sailors say his spirit never left that ship. Woo! But in all seriousness, that wasn't the only disaster this boat was a part of, before the 10 people I'm about to talk about disappeared. Because fast forward to 1867, the same ship runs aground in Cow Bay, Nova Scotia. Her hull gets cracked. She gets dragged back to port, patched up, but before she could even settle in, she crashes into another ship in the English Channel. So now, this boat has 2 disasters. 2 disasters, 1 boat? That's not just bad luck. I mean, that's gotta be a warning, right? Her owners had enough of this cursed thing. They sold her for cheap to an American sailor named Richard W. Haynes, who tried to give her a fresh start. He gave her the name history now knows her by, Mary Celeste. Haynes made some upgrades, made her structure a bit stronger, tried to calm his own nerves about the apparent curse. But even he could feel it. Something was just not right. Eventually, he sold her too. Now get this, all because of bad vibes. And that's how she ended up in the hands of Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs. Which is where our story truly begins. A seasoned sailor himself, Briggs thought he could tame the cursed ship. Now, since we're mentioning this whole story in this video, you could probably guess he was dead wrong. On November 7th, 1872, the Mary Celeste set sail from New York Harbor, headed for Genoa, Italy to deliver a shipment. On board were 10 people, Captain Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and a crew of 7 experienced sailors. The ship carried 1,700 barrels of crude alcohol, and they were tightly sealed bound for Europe. But ladies and box heads, they were never seen again. Weeks had passed, not a word, no sightings. Then on December 4th, 1872, nearly a month after she set sail, a British ship, the DeGradia, spotted something strange bobbing in the waters near the Azores Islands. They steered closer. It was a ship. But here's the kicker. There were no people to be seen on board. And if you somehow have short-term memory loss, there were 10 people originally on board. Its sails were flapping around in all directions, no distress flags, no crew were waving for help. It was just calmly drifting. Captain David Morehouse of the DeGradia narrowed his eyes. He recognized her. It was the gosh darn Mary Celeste. And he knew Captain Briggs. They shared drinks in New York just a few weeks earlier. So why was his ship just floating around by itself? To figure that out, Morehouse sent a boarding party. They climbed aboard the Mary Celeste and they were met with a strange silence. No shouting, no footsteps, no voices, just the wind. It was creepy as hell. The strange part wasn't even that the crew had vanished, it was how ordinary and untouched everything looked. What are you gonna think when you show up and there's no blood and no signs of struggle? Everything's just gone. There wasn't a single scratch on the hull that shouldn't have been there. Now you're probably thinking, maybe we can trace them by the cargo that they were taking to Europe. Well, you smarty pants, the cargo was still there. 1,700 barrels of alcohol untouched. Now, you know what I'm gonna do with it though. Actually, I think the crew beat me to it because there were a few cracked open. Now, the navigational instruments were still working, the maps were still spread out. There were still food stores packed neatly in the galley. Clean drinking water, spare clothing still folded. Ladies in box heads, it's if everyone just simply stepped out for a moment. But they hadn't. Because the Mary Celeste had been drifting alone for 11 days when the DeGradia crew found her. 11 full days. I mean, do you know how many new people could subscribe to my channel in that time? Whew. Subscribe. No one at the helm, no one guiding her. So after the search, the only things that were missing were one lifeboat and all 10 of the people on board. The British sailors poked around the ship carefully. Some of them didn't even want to go far below deck. One of them claimed he heard something below. Something like whispers down in the lower hold. Another one of them swore he felt someone watching him from the shadows near the captain's quarters. But this is all mumbo jumbo because there was nothing there. Except like 3.5 feet of water slushing around in the bottom of the hold. Just enough to raise some questions. Because with that much water, that means that the ship's pump was broken. So maybe that explained it. Just maybe. And beyond the ship, drifting loosely in the ocean current was a frayed rope. Cut or torn, they couldn't tell. But whatever had once been tied to it was long gone. With no one alive aboard, Captain Morehouse made a decision. He split his own men between the DeGradia and the Mary Celeste. Together, the two ships turned around toward mainland Europe. But this is a mystery after all, there is no happy endings. So now begins the ghostly voyage of the Mary Celeste's second crew. Some of them slept on deck, others refused to go below at all. While they were on the ship, one of the sailors swore he saw a shadow standing near the wheel in the dead of night. Yeah, he probably just had the spookies because they eventually made it to Europe. Once they docked, Morehouse wasted no time. He contacted the authorities, handing the situation over to London's Attorney General, Frederick Sollyflood. Now here's where things got complicated. According to maritime law, anyone who finds an abandoned ship at sea has to report it. No salvaging, no selling the cargo, not until an official investigation proves that there was no foul play. And Sollyflood, he didn't trust what he was seeing. He launched a full-scale inquiry into the case of the Mary Celeste. Who was responsible? Why had the ship been abandoned? Was there violence? Was it mutiny? Piracy? Poison? Or something scarier? The investigation dragged on for 3 long months. Dozens of interviews, piles of paperwork. And at the center of it all, the crew of the DeGradia. The more they talked, the more suspicious they looked. Something just didn't sit right with the police. If they weren't responsible, then who was? Eventually, Sollyflood made his ruling. Drum rolls, please. There had been no foul play by the British crew. Still, they didn't get the full reward of the ship, just a portion. As if somewhere deep down the authorities weren't entirely convinced the DeGradia had told them everything. And then came the theories. People tried to explain what happened that day. Some thought it was pirates, some blamed storms, some even suggested the crew had gone mad from the fumes leaking out of the alcohol barrels. But none of these theories ever stuck. So now let's do something a little bit different. Let's try to backtrack what could have gone down if you were one of the deckhands hired for the Mary Celeste voyage. It's November of 1872 in New York, the tide is pulling in and you're ready to set sail. You wave to your family, your wife, your children, Boxhead, your friends. It's just another job, just another trip across the Atlantic. You step onto the wooden gangplank, and the second your foot hits the deck, you feel it. A chill, like the ship is watching you. You dismiss it, it's probably nothing. The first few weeks were all smooth sailing, quiet seas, routine work. Everything feels normal until November 25th. You're just finishing your shift when someone shouts from above, "Land!" You rush up, the Azore Mountains are visible in the distance. The captain quickly scribbles it down in the logbook. And then a huge tentacle comes out of the sea. It's huge, impossible. One by one, your crewmates are snatched up, dragged into the icy black water. Another tentacle crashes down beside you. You scream, you dive for the lower deck, but it's too late. Something wraps around your back, suction cups gripping your skin. You are pulled overboard. The water swallows you whole. Above, the Mary Celeste continues to float ahead, completely untouched, as if nothing ever happened. Some say that theory is ridiculous, but there are actually people who believe this happened. Okay, say you don't believe that one. There's another one you might like. Wait, hold your flying box head. Is that War Thunder? War Thunder, the most comprehensive vehicle combat multiplayer game ever made, that drops you into the chaos of battle with unmatched realism and scale. Command an arsenal of iconic military vehicles, stuff like tanks, aircrafts, helicopters, and warships, spanning from the mid-20th century to cutting-edge modern prototypes. War Thunder lets you define your own playstyle, deploy advanced military tech like guided missiles, thermal vision, and even nuclear strikes to turn the tide of a battle. Also, say goodbye to health bars. War Thunder's unique damage model brings every hit to life. The X-ray damage effect makes every shot a tactical decision. Now wait, let me tell you about the recent Storm Warning update. The game now supports ray tracing, fully realistic shadows, lighting, and reflections. Also, there are new advanced military vehicles introduced. Jets, Eurofighter Typhoons, and Rafale plus M44 for ground combat. And many more, boxheads. Even go ahead and test these new toys out on the new map Attica. Ladies and boxheads, download War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox by using the cute little link in the description. All new players and those who haven't played War Thunder for half a year or more will receive some special bonuses. 100,000 Silver Lions, a special decorator Eagle of Valor, and more. And you can also dive into the action on War Thunder Mobile. Download it on Android and iOS, the link is also in the description, people. Land ahead! You look toward the faint outline in the distance. It should be good news. But then you see a black speck just off the port side. It's getting closer, a flag black. A skull grinning with hollow eyes. Crossbones, the Jolly Roger. Ah, it's pirates! It's too late. The enemy ship pulls along the Mary Celeste. Ropes fly through the air, hooks catch on the railings. They swing aboard with blades drawn, shouting in all sorts of languages you don't understand. Steel clashes, feet thunder against the deck. One by one, your crewmates are seized. Some fight, some run, some beg. And then silence. The pirates look around. They don't take the cargo, not even a single barrel of alcohol. Instead, they rip out the ship's water pump and steal one lifeboat. Then they vanish just as quickly as they arrived. You would think that pirates would take treasure, loot, anything. Because, good golly, I know I would. But nope, they left everything else exactly where it was. Now you boxhead, you probably think that that theory doesn't make much sense either. Still, it's a story. And back then, stories like this were spreading like wildfire. Even Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, gave this mystery his own twist in his story J. Habakkuk Jepson's Statement. I really hope I pronounced that right, but anyways, in his book, the crew didn't disappear without a trace. They were murdered. The killer was a vengeful ex-slave who was hiding away below deck, coming up occasionally from the darkness and throwing each and every passenger overboard one by one. Then he took the lifeboat and rode off alone into the sunset. It wasn't real, of course, just fiction. But boy, was that explanation a hit. And it made the Mary Celeste legendary. Still, maybe it's time we turn toward theories that don't rely on sea monsters, pirates, or secret stowaways. So a strange, sharp smell starts to spread through the ship. A chemical stench of toxic fumes from barrels of alcohol. Not the kind that you drink, but a denatured flammable verity. It's bad, way too bad. The captain, realizing the danger, orders the crew to abandon ship. Everyone piles onto the lifeboat to leave the ship to air out, then return when it's safe. But the rope tying the lifeboat to the ship snaps, and before anyone could act, the boat drifts away from the Mary Celeste, pushed by the waves. The ship fades into the distance and they're never seen again. But then that still doesn't answer the question of where they ended up on the lifeboat. Anyways, let's talk about another possibility. The crew had been at sea for weeks, maybe even longer. They were bound to get crazy bored. The alcohol was meant for other purposes, but maybe they decided, I need a drink. A few drinks, maybe more, fun time turns into chaos. Some whispers about a mutiny, and before long the crew takes matters into their own hands. They storm the captain's quarters, overpower him, and take control of the ship. But no one's prepared. They don't know how to navigate the sea. The maps are useless, and soon the weather worsens. Eventually, they spot land, pile into a lifeboat in a desperate bid for safety. But the weather turns against them, and soon they're swallowed by the sea. And again, the Mary Celeste keeps sailing. Now this theory, it seems pretty plausible, right? But there's a more likely theory, and it actually comes from modern times. Anne McGregor, a researcher and filmmaker, led a team to investigate the truth behind the legend. They checked all of the logs, the coordinates, and even simulated the weather patterns from the voyage. What they found was pretty simple. The Mary Celeste was off course by over 120 miles. In unfamiliar waters, surrounded by hidden shoals and uncertain weather, it would be really easy to start panicking. This could cause a misjudgment, a rushed evacuation, a rope that didn't hold. McGregor's team seems to think that it was everything all at once. One of the water pumps had failed. It had to be taken apart and fixed by hand. But obviously, time was not on their side. At the same time, the ship was drifting far from where it was supposed to be. The charts didn't match, the maps lied, every decision Captain Briggs made was based on faulty information. Then the weather turned, waves crashed against the hull. Without a working pump, the Mary Celeste began to take on water. It wasn't much, but enough to raise alarm bells, which led Briggs to having a choice. Stay and risk everyone going down with the ship, or abandon it while they still have a chance. And with the one lifeboat missing, he chose to go on the lifeboat. They lowered it into the sea with it connecting to the Mary Celeste by a rope. But the ocean doesn't want to play fair. The thing snaps and the boat and everyone on it were swallowed by the waves, never to be seen again. Case solved? Not really. The story doesn't end there. The Mary Celeste was brought back to England with her cargo intact, right? So now she was sold off, passed from one captain to the next for 12 long years, until 1885 when it came into Captain G.C. Parker's hands. And surprise, surprise, he accidentally steered the ghost ship straight into a reef off the coast of Haiti. And guess what? The Mary Celeste didn't sink. She was left behind to rot. Next, we have the story of the USS Cyclops, a ship that completely vanished into the Bermuda Triangle without a trace, taking all 309 passengers with it. Let's rewind the clock to 1917. World War I is in full swing, the oceans are crawling with German U-boats, and every vessel crossing the Atlantic is one unlucky turn away from disaster. Okay, so now the USS Cyclops was a beast. Built in 1910, this wasn't some rickety old fishing boat. She was the biggest mama the United States Navy had. 540 feet long, 65 feet wide. And for my slower little box heads out there, let me put this in some perspective. Imagine 1.5 football fields floating on steel. Her job was lugging tons of coal across oceans to keep the Navy's war machines running. So you could imagine why she was called the Cyclops. It was after Greek mythology. Massive, strong, and unstoppable is what it really means. Anyways, in 1917, when the US jumped into World War I, Cyclops was pulled into service. She ferried troops, carried supplies, and kept Allied warships fueled. No drama, no problems, just steady work. So you dumb boxhead, why are you talking about this story if it's all steady work? That's because I want to tell you about its very last mission. February 15th, 1918. The Cyclops departs Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Her hull is packed tight with manganese ore, a heavy, super dense metal used to make steel. Now, there was somewhere between 10,000 and 11,000 tons of this stuff. That's a lot of weight. I mean, it weighed more than your mama. Damn, I sound like a grandpa. Anyways, there was way more coal and some port officials didn't really like what they saw. She looked overloaded. Her waterline was way lower than it should have been. Her crew was totally unfamiliar with the ore, red flags waving all over the place. But it gets worse. Before leaving Rio, the ship's captain reported a cracked cylinder on the engine. Basically, half of her engine power was out of commission. That dropped her top speed from 15 knots to 10. And I already know you guys watching are a little bit slow, so that's basically being forced to go walking speed when you're supposed to be running. The Navy Survey Board confirmed the damage but cleared her to return to the United States for repairs. So the Cyclops went ahead towards Baltimore. Now, on paper, there were 309 people aboard, 15 officers, 57 passengers, and 200 plus crew members. Among them was Alfred L.M. Gottschalk, the American consul general at Rio. He'd served his post and was heading home, but he never made it. March 3rd. Instead of continuing straight to Baltimore, the Cyclops pulls into Barbados. Nobody really knows why. Maybe they needed more supplies, who knows. Maybe the captain didn't trust the cargo. Inspectors there noticed something a little bit strange. The ore was starting to spread out unevenly. That's a super big problem on a ship that size. It has to be flat. I mean, it could not be spread unevenly. Add in the waterline being too high because of the weight, and it was clear the ship was riding way too low. Still, no one stopped her. March 4th, 1918. The Cyclops sets sail from Barbados for Baltimore. The skies are clear, the sea is calm. A final radio message goes out. Weather fair, all well. Ladies and boxheads, that was the last anyone ever heard. Now, she was supposed to arrive in Baltimore on March 13th. When she didn't show up, people started to wait. Maybe she hit a storm. Maybe she lost power. Maybe she was just running late, who knows. But days passed with no information. But soon enough, when the Cyclops failed to show up in Baltimore for a full week, panic really started to set in. Radio operators across the Atlantic kept sending message after message, trying to make contact. US Cyclops, come in! Cyclops, this is Charleston Station, respond. Nothing. Dozens of ships in the area tried to find the Cyclops. Hundreds and hundreds of calls went out, no one got an answer. And just like social media nowadays, the press wasted no time. Theories hit the papers faster than a telegraph wire could blink. Hey, come on, that joke was kinda creative. Anyways, was it a freak storm, a German U-boat, a Munity, or something, like I said earlier, way more terrifying? And just like our last story, there were once again many theories about a giant octopus. Man, Americans really love a good monster story. Why did I just have a southern accent? Naturally, the Navy didn't spend too much time chasing that one, so what happened? The weather theory was the first theory. And in 1918, meteorology wasn't exactly high tech, so they couldn't have just predicted bad weather. Seems possible, but most experts were like, hell nah. There were no major storms reported in the area during the time. And if there had been a storm strong enough to sink a whole ship that size, wouldn't the crew's funky ass have sent a distress call? Unless they couldn't. Some scientists have pointed to a type of storm called a mesometeorological event. They're quick, violent, and brutal. They form right over the Gulf Stream, flash into existence, unleash hell, and then disappear. Sometimes all within minutes. The radio interference, the rogue waves, the sudden destruction with no warning, it all fits. Still, it's just a theory. And what about the Germans we talked about earlier? It was wartime after all. The Cyclops was a valuable ship. A slow-moving, overloaded Navy collier with a busted engine? That's just a sitting duck for a German U-boat. But when US forces cracked German codes and intercepted military communications, they found nothing. No record of an attack, no sign that any U-boat had even been in the area. So something didn't add up. Of course, no story this strange gets by without a shady figure in the middle of the action. And in this case, ladies and boxheads, that was Lieutenant Commander George W. Worley. Now that name might sound red, white, and blue, but George wasn't born in the land of liberty. His real name was Johann Friedrich Wichmann. Born in Germany and later reborn in America under a new identity. Suspicious, a little. Especially during World War I when anything remotely German raised eyebrows. Some of his crew even called him names behind his back. Rumors spread that Worley might have been a traitor. That he'd quietly turned over the Cyclops to the Germans. Handed the whole steel beast over like a Trojan horse with 309 people inside. Now the reason this theory doesn't make much sense is because German records had no proof of this captain being associated with them. But while Worley may have not been a secret agent, he was a bit of a weirdo. Okay, more than a bit. Accounts from sailors described the captain as strange. That's putting it really lightly. He was known to wander the quarterdeck wearing just his underwear, a cane, and a hat. Imagine seeing your captain in some undies. Like, hello? I'm supposed to be working here. And it didn't really stop at odd fashion choices. According to unconfirmed reports, tensions on the Cyclops were at a breaking point right before the ship vanished. Some of the crew had apparently tried to, mutiny, pissed off by Worley's drunkenness and erratic leadership. Some even claimed that he had one of them executed. Nobody liked this guy. Even the US consul in Barbados made a point of mentioning how much the officers seemed to despise him. In a terrifying letter sent after the ship disappeared, the consul wrote, "While not having any definite grounds, I fear fate worse than sinking, though possibly based on instinctive dislike felt towards the master." A fate worse than sinking? A fate worse than sinking? That's a heavy accusation. But even if a mutiny did happen, if the crew took control and overthrew the captain, it still doesn't explain the disappearance. Like guys, you don't just sail away with a 540-foot ship and vanish without a ripple. So maybe the answer wasn't sabotage or war or murder at sea. Maybe it was a flaw in the ship itself. The USS Cyclops had 3 sister ships, nearly identical in design. One of them was the USS Jupiter, the USS Nereus, and the USS Proteus. Now the Jupiter was sunk in World War II by Japanese bombers, so its end is accounted for, but the other 2 were gone. Both vanished in 1941, both were carrying ore, just like the Cyclops, and both disappeared while sailing through the, you guessed it, the Bermuda Triangle. Coincidence? Not likely. Navy Admiral George Van Duras had a theory. He believed that the ships, built to carry coal, just weren't suited for heavy ore like bauxite or manganese. He pointed out that the support beams in the Cyclops-class ships might have already been weakened after years of carrying acidic coal. So when they were suddenly loaded up with an even denser cargo, the stress might have been too much, the steel could have snapped. And the ship, well you guessed it, straight to the bottom. But what if that's what happened? Where's the wreck? Not even a single bolt from the Cyclops has ever turned up. Now I know a lot of box heads try to play detective. Maybe the Cyclops just sank somewhere deep and we haven't found it yet. You're not alone, a lot of people think that. Some scientists believe the answer could be sitting quietly in one of the most mysterious and unforgiving places on Earth, the Puerto Rico Trench. This is the deepest part of the Atlantic, plunging down 27,500 feet into darkness. Now I know you guys don't like numbers, so that's nearly as deep as Mount Everest. Like if you were to put Mount Everest in the water, that's how deep you're going. It's just like me, you feel me? Okay, but in all seriousness, you know what? The Puerto Rico Trench sits right at the edge of the Bermuda Triangle's southern border. If a ship wanted to vanish forever, that's the spot to do it. Now, back in the 1960s, hope of finding this wreck almost arrived. A seasoned Navy diver named Dean Hawes was searching the ocean floor near Cape Charles, which is in Virginia, when he came across something huge. He spotted a bridge on tall steel poles. An unusual feature, but one that matched the exact design of the USS Cyclops. Had he just found the ghost ship? He surfaced eager to return with a dive team. But the weather had other plans. A storm rolled in, the waves grew rough, and Hawes had no choice but to leave the site behind. Years later, he saw a photo of the Cyclops in a magazine, and his blood ran cold. That right there was the ship. Hawes convinced the Navy to send a team back out to the site. But when they did, the wreck they found wasn't the Cyclops. It was another ship from another time. And just like that, the trail went cold again. Was there something out of this world at play? I don't know. Enter Gordon Cooper, who was an astronaut, and his friend Daryl Miklo, a Discovery Channel treasure hunter. Cooper, before he passed, shared maps he'd made from space. Maps showing unusual things in the Bermuda Triangle. Daryl followed one such map in 2018, and he actually found something. A massive submerged object. It didn't look natural, it didn't look man-made. Daryl's funky ass, he thinks it could be aliens. Yeah, I said it, aliens. He believes the Bermuda Triangle might be a hotspot for extraterrestrial kidnappings, where ships like the Cyclops simply vanish into the sky, or deeper. Is that a bit wild, everyone? Maybe. But after researching for this video, is it totally out of the picture for me? I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Now, if you want to hear about ocean disasters that are actually solved and are completely insane, click this video right here where I talk about the most painful ocean deaths ever. And guys, I'm about to be making a lot longer videos, about like 40, 50-minute videos. So if you guys want to stick around for that, also hit the subscribe button. I love you guys. I literally love doing this job every single day. And I don't really say it to you guys enough. Hope you guys are doing well, and see you in the next video.